The phone rang, and my stomach just dropped. It was my mother, Carol, and her voice, usually a bit syrupy, was thin and sharp, like a sliver of ice. "Ethan, we need to talk. Come to the house now." Something in her tone, that absolute lack of warmth, twisted a knot in my gut. I drove over, a prickle of unease already setting in. When I walked through the front door, the air in the living room was thick and cold, like walking into a freezer. My parents, Carol and Robert, were there, along with my younger sister, Brooke. It felt like an ambush. The blinds were drawn tight, muting the afternoon sun. Brooke wouldn't meet my eyes. Carol was clutching a tissue, her face blotchy. My father stood by the window, arms crossed, his face a furious red. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between them. My mother stood slowly, her hands trembling. "Brooke told us everything." "Told you what?" My mind was racing, trying to catch up. And then Robert turned around, and the look in his eyes. I'd never seen it before. Pure hatred. Pure disgust, like I was something foul he'd scraped off his shoe. "She told us what you did to her," he said, his voice barely controlled, "when she was 15. When you were 17, in this house, in her bedroom." My brain short-circuited. The words just didn't compute. They were nonsense. I couldn't even process what he was saying. "What are you talking about?" Brooke finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I couldn't keep it inside anymore," she sobbed. "Not after what Grandpa Arthur did. Not after knowing you're going to get everything. You don't deserve that money, Ethan. Not after what you did to me." I stood there, frozen. My own sister was accusing me of something I hadn't done, something I would never do. Something so monstrous I couldn't even form words to respond. "That never happened," I finally managed, my voice steady, even though my insides were collapsing. "Brooke, why are you saying this? Don't you dare call her a liar," my father roared, stepping toward me. "She told us everything, the details, where, when, how you threatened her to keep quiet all these years." Carol was openly sobbing now, wringing the tissue in her hands. "How could you, Ethan? She's your sister. Your own sister." I looked at Brooke, searching her face for some sign that this was a sick joke, a twisted prank. But all I saw was conviction. She'd committed to this lie completely. "Mom," I pleaded, turning to her. "You know me. You've known me my whole life. You know I would never, I don't know anything anymore," she whispered. "My daughter is sitting here crying, telling me her brother violated her, and you want me to believe you?" "Yes," I said simply. "Because it didn't happen." Robert grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "Get out of this house. Don't come to the reading tomorrow. Don't come anywhere near this family. If you show your face, I'll call the police myself and tell them exactly what kind of monster you are." I stood my ground for a moment, looking at each of them. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father was red-faced and trembling with rage, and Brooke sat there, crying tears that weren't real, playing the victim role like she'd rehearsed it 100 times. I pulled my arm free. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. "And when the truth comes out, you're going to have to live with what you did today." Then I walked out. That night, I sat in my apartment in Erie, Pennsylvania, staring at the wall, trying to piece together what had just happened. The accusation was so absurd, so completely disconnected from reality, that part of me kept expecting to wake up from a nightmare. My own sister had accused me of something monstrous to cut me out of Grandpa Arthur's will. And my parents had believed her without even asking me a single question, without wanting to hear my side, without a shred of evidence. They just believed her because it was easier than believing me. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there in the dark, thinking about Grandpa Arthur, wondering what he would say if he could see what was happening to the family he'd worked so hard to provide for. See, Grandpa Arthur was the real center of our family. He'd built a commercial refrigeration company from nothing back in the 70s, turned it into a regional powerhouse. He sold it years ago for millions, invested wisely, and by the time I was in my early 20s, his estate was worth around $12 million. He was the only one who truly saw me. While my parents were shuttling Brooke to dance recitals, Grandpa would take me to his workshop. He noticed my interest in mechanical work, encouraged me to pursue HVAC, even helped pay for my certification courses when my parents dismissed trade school as settling. He'd always say, "Ethan, people who work with their hands build the world everyone else just lives in." That stuck with me. When I was 23, 6 months before that awful night, Grandpa Arthur pulled me aside during a family dinner. Everyone else was inside watching football, but he took me out to the back porch with 2 cups of coffee. He had that look in his eye that meant something serious was coming. "Ethan, I've been thinking a lot about the future lately," he'd said, looking out at his garden. "I'm 83. I need to make sure things are handled right when I'm gone." He told me he'd updated his will, and I was going to inherit the bulk of his estate. Not because he didn't love Brooke or my parents, but because he knew who had the character for responsibility. I was floored. I tried to protest, to say he should split it more evenly. He raised a hand to stop me. "Brooke has a spending problem," he'd said bluntly. "She'll burn through millions and blame everyone but herself. Your parents aren't much better. They've always cared more about looking successful than actually being successful." He turned to me directly. "But you, Ethan, you've got integrity. You understand that money is a tool, not a trophy. I'm leaving you the lion's share because I trust you to be the steward of this family's future. You'll take care of them even when they don't deserve it. I made the mistake of telling my parents about it. I know. Looking back, it was stupid. But I genuinely thought they'd be proud that Grandpa saw something in me. I thought it might actually improve how they treated me. I mentioned it casually at dinner, that Grandpa had updated his will and I'd be receiving a larger portion because he trusted me to manage things. I didn't give specifics. I just said he'd structured things a certain way. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw tightened. Brooke, who happened to be visiting that weekend, looked at me like I'd stolen something from her. "That's not fair," she'd said immediately. "I'm his grandchild, too." I tried to explain that it wasn't about fairness, it was about responsibility. But she didn't hear any of that. Her face twisted into something ugly for a second before she smoothed it out. "He must not know the real you," she'd said quietly. I should have paid more attention to that comment. I should have seen it for the threat it was. That conversation planted a seed. A seed that had now blossomed into the worst nightmare of my life. Grandpa Arthur had passed away peacefully in his sleep about 6 months earlier. The funeral was packed, people from 3 states. I gave one of the eulogies, talking about how he taught me that hard work and integrity were the only currencies that mattered. Brooke sat in the front row with my parents, dabbing at her eyes. Now I wonder if those tears were real. The next morning, the day after my family's ambush, I did something Robert told me not to do. I showed up at the will reading. I wasn't going to let Brooke's lies erase me from my grandfather's final wishes. He'd trusted me. He'd believed in me. The least I could do was be there. Walter Thorne's office was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building downtown. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, law books lining the walls. When I walked in, my family was already seated. Brooke gasped when she saw me, like I was some kind of threat. Carol clutched her purse. Robert stood up immediately, his face going red. "I told you not to come here," he said through clenched teeth. "And I'm here anyway," I replied calmly, taking a seat across from them. "Because this is my grandfather's will and I have every right to be present." Walter Thorne looked between us, his sharp silver eyes clearly sensing the tension. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Robert opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. No problem, Mr. Thorne. Please proceed. Walter studied us for a moment longer, then nodded and opened the folder in front of him. The reading went exactly as Grandpa Arthur had told me it would. The house went to a local charity. Various personal items were distributed to friends and extended family. My parents received $200,000 each. Brooke received $150,000. And I received the residual estate, including all investments and remaining assets, valued at approximately $11.4 million. The room went dead silent. Brooke's face twisted, the mask slipping completely. For just a second, I saw pure rage in her eyes. Carol started crying again. Robert slammed his hand on Walter's desk hard enough to make the pens rattle. "This is wrong," he said loudly. "There's been a mistake." Walter Thorne looked at him calmly, completely unruffled. "I assure you, Mr. Reynolds, there's no mistake." Arthur was very specific about his wishes. He updated this will 3 times over the past 5 years, and each version maintained the same distribution. I have copies of every revision if you'd like to review them. He didn't know, Brooke suddenly blurted out, her voice rising. He didn't know what Ethan did to me. If he had known, he never would have left him anything. He would have left everything to me. Walter Thorne's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm sorry. What are you referring to?" Robert jumped in, his voice hard. "Our daughter has recently disclosed that Ethan sexually assaulted her when they were teenagers. We believe this information would have changed Arthur's decision about the estate." The lawyer was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he folded his hands on the desk. "These are extremely serious allegations," he said carefully. "If there's credible evidence of criminal conduct, that could potentially be grounds for a legal challenge to the estate distribution. However, I should inform you that Arthur anticipated family disputes might arise after his passing. He left explicit instructions for how to handle them." He pulled out another document, a separate envelope with Grandpa Arthur's handwriting on it. Arthur specified that any challenge to the will must be accompanied by verifiable evidence reviewed by an independent party before any distributions are altered or delayed. He also included a no-contest clause, meaning that any beneficiary who challenges the will and loses forfeits their inheritance entirely. My father's face paled. "What do you mean, evidence?" "Police reports, court records, medical documentation, witness statements under oath, something substantive and verifiable." Walter looked directly at Brooke. "Miss Reynolds, did you ever report this alleged assault to authorities?" Brooke's confidence flickered for the first time. "No, I was scared. He threatened me." "Are there any witnesses? Any documentation at all? A diary entry? A text message? Anything?" "No, but that doesn't mean, then I'm afraid without evidence, there's nothing actionable here. The estate will be distributed according to Arthur's wishes." Walter closed the folder. "I should also mention that if you pursue a challenge without substantive evidence and lose, you forfeit the $150,000 Arthur left you." Brooke's face went white. My parents looked at each other, clearly not having expected this. "This isn't right," Carol said weakly. "He would have wanted to know. He would have changed his mind." Walter Thorne's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Mrs. Reynolds, I've known Arthur for 30 years. He was one of the most thorough, thoughtful people I've ever worked with. He spent months considering how to structure this estate. He consulted with financial advisors, estate planners, and me. He knew exactly what he was doing." He paused. "And frankly, if you'll forgive me for saying so, he anticipated something like this might happen." "What's that supposed to mean?" Robert demanded. "It means Arthur knew his family very well. He structured this will specifically to protect his wishes from challenges based on last-minute accusations without proof. He told me, and I quote, 'If there's drama after I'm gone, make sure the truth wins.' That's what I'm doing. Brooke exploded. You can't just ignore what I'm telling you. He assaulted me. My own brother. Walter Thorne remained completely calm. I'm not ignoring anything, Miss Reynolds. I'm simply following the legal framework your grandfather established. If you have evidence to support your claims, I encourage you to pursue appropriate legal channels, file a police report, press charges, have your day in court. But accusations alone cannot alter a legal document. Robert stood up, knocking his chair backward. This isn't over. We'll get our own lawyer. We'll contest this in court. We'll expose him for what he really is. Walter nodded. That's your right. But I'd advise you to remember the no contest clause. And I'd advise you to remember that courts require evidence, not just accusations. They stormed out without looking at me. Brooke shot me one last glare as she passed. Her mask completely gone now. What I saw behind it wasn't hurt or trauma. It was fury. The fury of someone whose plan had just hit an unexpected wall. I stayed behind to shake Walter Thorne's hand. Your grandfather was a wise man, he said quietly after they'd gone. He knew something like this might happen. That's why he built in those protections. He saw things other people didn't, I said, my voice thick. Yes, he did. Walter looked at me with something like respect. He saw you, Ethan. He told me once that you were the only member of his family who never disappointed him. He said everyone else wanted something from him, but you just wanted to spend time with him. I had to look away for a second. That hit harder than I expected. The estate transfer will take a few weeks, Walter continued. But the money is yours, Arthur made sure of that. And Ethan, for what it's worth, I don't believe a word of what your sister said in there. I've been doing this for 40 years. I know what real trauma looks like, and I know what a fabrication looks like. That was a fabrication. I nodded. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Call me Walter. Your grandfather did. The next few months were brutal. More brutal than I ever could have anticipated. Even though I'd been cleared at the reading, my family launched a full campaign to destroy me. My parents called every relative we had, every family friend, every neighbor who'd known us since I was a kid. They painted me as a monster, someone who'd hidden his true nature for years, someone who'd fooled everyone, including Grandpa Arthur. My mother apparently sobbed on the phone to her sister for 2 hours about how she'd failed to protect Brooke, and how she'd had a predator living under her roof. My father told his buddies at the bowling alley that he should have seen the signs and that he felt sick knowing what his son really was. Brooke took to social media like it was her job. She posted vague things about surviving trauma and family betrayal and finally speaking my truth. She wrote long posts about how silence protects abusers and how sometimes the people closest to you are the most dangerous. She never named me directly, but everyone in our small social circle knew exactly who she was talking about. The comments were full of support. Hundreds of people telling her how brave she was, how strong she was, how they believed her. People I'd known my whole life were suddenly convinced I was capable of something horrific. Old friends stopped returning my calls. Guys I'd played basketball with in high school would cross the street when they saw me coming. Coworkers started giving me weird looks and finding excuses not to ride with me to job sites. My boss, a decent guy named David, who'd always treated me fairly, pulled me aside one afternoon with an uncomfortable look on his face. Ethan, I've been getting calls, he said. Anonymous calls, people asking why I employ someone with your history. My stomach dropped. David, none of it's true. My sister made it up because of a family inheritance dispute. I can explain everything. He held up a hand. You don't have to explain anything to me. I've known you for 3 years. You're one of the best technicians I've ever had. I'm not firing you over rumors. I exhaled, relief flooding through me, but he continued, I'm going to have to keep you on internal work for a while. Back office stuff, inventory, equipment maintenance, training new guys. I can't send you into people's homes right now. If word gets around and someone complains, it could tank the business. It wasn't fair, but I understood. I spent the next 4 months doing work that bored me to tears. All because my sister decided to lie. The isolation was suffocating. I'd go to work, come home, stare at the walls, eat something microwaved, sleep badly, repeat. There were nights I'd sit in my apartment wondering if maybe I should just give them the money, let them have it, walk away, and start over somewhere no one knew my name. I even drove to the Ohio border once, middle of the night, thinking about just keeping going, disappearing, starting fresh with a new identity and no family baggage. But I stopped at a rest area and sat in my truck for an hour. And I thought about Grandpa Arthur, about what he'd wanted, about why he'd trusted me, about what he'd say if he could see me running away from a fight I hadn't started. I could hear his voice in my head, Ethan, you don't run from lies. You outlast them. The truth always surfaces. Your job is to be standing when it does, and I remembered that giving in to liars doesn't make the lies stop. It just teaches them that lying works. So I turned around and drove home. I held on day by day, week by week, month by agonizing month. I documented everything. Every social media post Brooke made, I screenshot it with timestamps. Every time someone cut me off or refused to speak to me, I wrote it down. Every weird look from a coworker. Every whispered conversation that stopped when I walked in, I recorded. I didn't know what I'd use it for, but Grandpa always said, a man who doesn't keep records is a man who can't prove anything. What I didn't expect was how the truth would finally come out. About 6 months after the reading, Brooke made a fatal mistake. She filed for a restraining order against me, claiming I'd been following her, showing up at her apartment, making threats. It was another lie designed to build a paper trail for a future legal challenge to the will. But to get a restraining order, you have to appear in court. You have to make statements under oath. And in court, there are lawyers asking questions. My attorney, a sharp woman named Sarah, who'd been recommended by Walter Thorne, prepared for that hearing like it was a murder trial. She subpoenaed Brooke's phone records, her social media history, her internet search history, and her financial records. What she found was damning. 2 weeks before Brooke first accused me, she'd sent a text message to her best friend that read, "Grandpa left almost everything to Ethan." Can you believe that garbage? I need to figure out a way to contest it. Maybe I can say he did something to me when we were kids. Who would question that? Her friend's response, that's genius. No one would ever question it. Play the victim and the money's yours. Sarah also found that Brooke had Googled how to contest a will, statute of limitations on assault, can an accusation without evidence change inheritance, and false memory implantation in the days following Grandpa Arthur's passing. She'd also opened 3 new credit cards and charged almost $25,000 in the 6 months after the reading, clearly anticipating she'd eventually get her hands on millions. The restraining order hearing turned into a disaster for Brooke. Sarah presented the evidence methodically, piece by piece, letting each item speak for itself, the text messages planning the accusation, the search history showing premeditation, the timeline that proved Brooke's accusation came only after she learned about the will distribution, not before. Brooke's lawyer tried to object, tried to redirect, tried to explain away each piece, but there was too much. The picture was too clear. The judge, an older woman named Judge Albright, who'd clearly seen plenty of family disputes in her career, wasn't just skeptical. She was visibly angry. "Miss Reynolds," she said, her voice cold as ice, "the evidence presented here strongly suggests your allegations against your brother were fabricated specifically for financial gain. Not only am I denying this restraining order, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges, including perjury, filing a false report, and attempted fraud." Brooke's face went white as paper. My parents, sitting behind her in the gallery, looked like they'd been hit by a truck. The judge turned to me. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm sorry you've had to endure this. The court system exists to pursue justice, not to be weaponized for personal vendettas. What your sister attempted to do to you is despicable, and I hope the relevant authorities pursue appropriate consequences. I just nodded. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired, bone deep, exhausted from months of fighting a battle I should never have had to fight. The fallout was swift and merciless. The district attorney did file charges against Brooke. The text messages alone were enough for fraud charges, and her statements under oath in the restraining order petition added perjury to the list. Her lawyer tried to negotiate, tried to argue that she'd been confused and emotionally overwhelmed by grief, but the DA wasn't buying it. Cases like this, where someone uses false accusations as a weapon, they wanted to make an example. The local news picked up the story, not as a huge headline, but enough that people started talking, enough that the narrative began to shift. Suddenly, I wasn't the monster everyone had been warned about. I was the victim of a scheming sister who'd lied for money. People who'd avoided me for months started reaching out. A coworker named Michael, who'd been distant, sent me a text that just said, "Sorry, man. Believed the wrong person." David put me back on regular service calls. Old friends called and stammered through awkward apologies. I didn't blame them. Not really. Brooke had been convincing. My parents had backed her up. When your own family is accusing you, people tend to believe them. That's just how it works. But I also didn't pretend everything was fine. Some relationships were damaged beyond repair. Some people had said things that couldn't be unsaid. I accepted apologies when they were sincere. But I also learned who my real friends were and who had just been fair-weather acquaintances. Brooke ended up pleading guilty to a lesser charge to avoid trial. She received 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent mark on her record that would follow her forever. The judge made it clear that any violation of probation would result in immediate jail time. I was in the courtroom when she entered her plea. She wouldn't look at me. Her lawyer did all the talking while she stood there with her head down, probably trying to look remorseful for the judge. My parents weren't there. I guess even they couldn't stomach watching their golden child admit to what she'd done. Afterward, in the parking lot, Brooke's lawyer approached me. "My client wanted me to tell you she's sorry," he said, looking uncomfortable. I looked past him to where Brooke was getting into her car. She glanced up for just a second, and our eyes met. "Tell your client that sorry doesn't give me back the 6 months of my life she stole," I said. "Tell her sorry doesn't undo what she put me through. Tell her that if she ever comes near me again, the restraining order won't be the one she filed." The lawyer nodded and walked away. I never spoke to Brooke again after that. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an only child now. My parents tried to distance themselves from the whole thing. Suddenly, they were shocked by Brooke's actions. Suddenly, they'd been manipulated by her lies. Suddenly, they wanted to reconnect with their son now that the truth was out. But Walter Thorne had one more card to play. He produced another document, a letter Grandpa Arthur had written to be opened only if there was a dispute over the estate. He'd given it to Walter with instructions to use it at his discretion. Walter read it aloud in his office with just me present. "To whoever is reading this," the letter began. "If Walter is sharing this, it means my family has shown their true colors. I want to explain why I made the choices I made. My son Robert and his daughter-in-law, Carol, have always prioritized appearance over substance. They raised Brooke to believe she was entitled to things she hadn't earned, and they failed to see the quiet strength in Ethan. I love them, but I don't trust them. I fear that if I leave them significant wealth, they will squander it and blame everyone but themselves. Ethan is different. He's worked for everything he has. He understands that money is responsibility, not reward. He has the character to build something lasting and the integrity to take care of family even when they don't deserve it. If my family is fighting over this estate, if accusations are being made, if people are showing sides of themselves I always suspected but hoped I was wrong about, then I want Ethan to know this. I chose him because he earned it. Not through flattery or manipulation, but through being the kind of man I always hoped my family would produce. Son, take care of them anyway. Not because they deserve it, but because that's who you are, and know that wherever I am, I'm proud of you. I had to stop reading after that. Walter handed me a glass of water and waited. He knew, I finally said. He knew they might do something like this. He suspected, Walter said. He didn't want to believe it, but he prepared for it. That's the kind of man he was. A year after the hearing, I finally had full control of the estate. The transfers were complete. The investments were consolidated. Walter helped me set up the structure Grandpa had recommended, trusts and accounts that would preserve the wealth rather than deplete it. I kept working as an HVAC technician. I liked the work. It kept me grounded. And honestly, after everything I'd been through, I needed normal more than I needed luxury. But I also did something Grandpa would have wanted, something I knew was the right thing to do, even though part of me didn't want to. I set up a trust that would provide for my parents if they ever truly needed it, medical emergencies, housing if they lost their home, basic necessities if they fell on hard times. They'd never be rich from it, but they wouldn't suffer either. I didn't tell them about it. I didn't want thanks or reconciliation. I just did it because Grandpa had asked me to take care of family, even when they didn't deserve it. Some people never learn. 3 years have passed since then. I'm 29 now. A year after getting full control of the estate, I started my own HVAC company. Nothing huge at first, just me and 2 guys I'd worked with before who I knew I could trust. We called it Reynolds Climate Solutions. Within 18 months, we had more work than we could handle, and I hired 3 more technicians. Word of mouth spread fast once people realized we showed up on time, did the job right, and didn't gouge anyone on pricing. I bought a house outside of Erie, 3 bedrooms, nice yard, quiet street, fixed most of it up myself. I met Chloe at a job site. Her veterinary clinic needed a new cooling system for their surgical suite, and I handled the install personally. She had 2 rescue dogs, a no-nonsense attitude, and she laughed at my terrible jokes. We got coffee after the job was done, then dinner, then more dinners. 6 months in, I told her everything, the accusation, the court, the family I'd lost. She listened without interrupting, then said, "So, when do I get to meet Walter? He sounds like good people." We got married last spring. Small ceremony, 40 people, at Phipps Conservatory outside Pittsburgh. Walter Thorne was there. So were some of Grandpa's old friends who'd reached out after everything went public. My coworkers came. Chloe's family came. My family wasn't invited. The wedding gift from Walter was a framed photo of Grandpa Arthur I'd never seen before. Him at maybe 40 years old, standing in front of his first service truck, grinning like he'd just conquered the world. On the back, Walter had written, he would have loved her. Brooke burned through her $150,000 inheritance in 18 months. Designer clothes, a trip to Europe, and a boyfriend named Mark who drove a leased BMW and talked about cryptocurrency. Mark disappeared 3 weeks after the money ran out. Brooke moved back in with my parents. Last I heard, she's working as a receptionist at a dental office. Her probation ended, but the conviction stays on her record. She tried to get it expunged. The judge said no. My parents' insurance business started struggling about 2 years ago. Turns out their reputation took a hit when the truth came out about what they'd done to me. People in small towns have long memories. A few of their biggest clients quietly took their business elsewhere. Last month, I got a letter from my mother. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting. Robert had been diagnosed with heart disease. They were drowning in medical bills. Insurance wasn't covering everything. She asked if I could help. She said they were sorry. She said they missed me. She said they'd made mistakes. I showed the letter to Chloe. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I picked up the phone and called the administrator of the trust I'd set up 3 years ago, the one my parents didn't know existed. I authorized full coverage for Robert's medical treatment, surgery, recovery, medication, whatever he needed. Then I threw the letter away. 2 weeks later, a hospital billing coordinator called my mother to tell her that an anonymous benefactor had covered all of my father's medical expenses. She called Walter Thorne's office 17 times trying to find out who it was. He didn't return the calls. Robert had his surgery last week. Triple bypass. He's recovering. My mother posted on social media about God's mysterious blessings and angels watching over them. I saw the post because Chloe showed me. I just shrugged and went back to working on a quote for a new commercial client. Sometimes I wonder, what kind of love makes you believe a lie about your own child?